that would be one way to look at it. Anybody else?
Uh,
Um, yeah, go ahead.
Pardon. Oh, I interpreted it as kind of trying to avoid level confusion, try to solve things or fit things in the space they're supposed to go in. If that makes sense.
Okay, so Simon sees it level confusion. Uh,
Uh, I, this is a stretch, but the cylinder may be the person, the being who's deciding between the left or right, which you can interpret either of those any way you want, like deciding in the, because of the split mind.
okay, a split mind. Noel sees a split mind in that. Thank you. Atisha,
To me, this says perspective is everything. You
can
know,
you,
it,
can you elaborate?
sure, yeah. So looking at the cylinder um, from the side of the square, the sides of the cylinder is projecting a completely different shape. And then from the other side, where the light is hitting the cylinder directly from the back, it's projecting the shape of a circle. And so that we could be looking at something and there be many different interpretations or many different ways of seeing something.
We're getting warm here. Many different interpretations. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thanks. It seems to me that the object that's between the two illuminated shapes could fit into either based on its size.
It has something to do with wholeness.
Okay, and Georgette sees it as a wholeness. Okay, so that was a pop quiz, and you guys are great at it. We're passing grades to everybody. And maybe when we're done with the reading today, there'll be some additional thoughts there. So, what we are going to, and then David says, what you see depends on your perspective, which is similar to Atisha's comment, is you're interpreting from a different perspective. And all that is relevant to A Course in Miracles and to the session that we will read today that contrasts perception with knowledge. And we want to move on from the object here so that we don't spend too much time on that, but we get into the course more. Hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader today is Atisha B.
We have been emphasizing perception and have said very little about knowledge as yet. This is because perception must be straightened out before you can know anything. To know is to be certain. Uncertainty means that you do not know. Knowledge is power because it is certain, and certainty is strength. Perception is temporary. As an attribute of the belief in space and time, it is subject to either fear or love. Misperceptions produce fear, and true perceptions foster love, but neither brings certainty because all perception varies. That is why it is not knowledge. True perception is the basis for knowledge, but knowing is the affirmation of truth and beyond all perceptions.
Mm-hmm. So let's first of all define terms. Should be review, but we want to make sure that we're clear. There are two types of perception. subject to either fear or love. If perception is subject to fear, we call it a misperception or a false perception. If perception is subject to love, then we call it a true perception. So two types of perception. And then the third level that we will talk about today is not perception at all, it's knowledge. And knowledge, we mean at the highest level of eternal knowing. So now we'll go back and try to understand what was said here. So perception is something that is done in space and time, not in eternity. Perception is something that we do now, and in a single moment, you can shift from fear to love or love to fear, right? You may have experienced this. Well, you can also, your perceptions can shift from true perception to false perception in a single moment. When it shifts from false perception to true perception, we think of that as healing. That's a good direction. But this is not knowledge. Knowledge is something altogether different. So, in plain terms, perception is an effort to take a little bit of information and try to create the bigger picture out of it. So you might only know one little thing about somebody, like let's say I say he just got out of prison. And that's all you know about the person. And then your mind tries to, with perception, to fill in all the rest of the detail so that you have an opinion, an interpretation about that person. Now, I'm baiting you here with the idea of just got out of prison here, right? It doesn't mean the person's bad. Got out of prison because he drove without a driver's license, right? So doesn't necessarily mean anything. Sorry for the example here. So perception is an interpretation, much like the image we looked at. You try to decide based on a little bit of information what it is that you are dealing with. It is always uncertain. It is uncertainty means that you're not sure. You're interpreting based on fragments of information, whereas knowledge is perfectly clear. Knowledge is certainty, no doubt. Knowledge is more of a heavenly confidence in knowing the truth and not being at all fooled by illusions. Okay, so those are the terms. Now there's a sequence to it also, from misperception, also known as false perception. We learn to heal, learn to forgive, and we acquire true perception. And from true perception is the launching point or the basis for knowledge. So you can only, from our point of view in time and space, we can only return to knowledge by first acquiring true perception and then moving to knowledge. You can't go from false perception to knowledge. True perception is the basis. So it's what is it? It's a step True perception is a stepping stone on the way to knowledge. Okay, I want to pause there, see if there's any questions, because this is all really definitional that we're talking about here. And now we're going to talk about the relationships of all those three to one another. But mostly in this session, we're going to contrast and the experiences of true perception with the experiences of knowledge. That's really the focus today, true perception versus knowledge. Okay, we'll go on.
All your difficulties stem from the fact that you do not recognize yourself, your brother, or God. To recognize means to know again, implying that you knew before. You can see in many ways because perception involves interpretation, and this means that it is not whole or consistent. The miracle, being a way of perceiving, is not knowledge. It is the right answer to a question, but you do not question when you know. Questioning illusions is the first step in undoing them. The miracle, or the right answer, corrects them. Since perceptions change, their dependence on time is obvious. How you perceive at any given time determines what you do, and actions must occur in time. Knowledge is timeless because certainty is not questionable. You know when you have ceased to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have more to say on asking questions in 2 more paragraphs. So for now, we'll just recognize that the first step in healing is to start questioning the illusions you always believed in. It's to start questioning, am I really an ego? Am I really a body? To start questioning, why is it that I'm feeling the way I'm feeling? And what is the meaning of my life? That's the first step. In itself, that does not heal, but it's a step in the right direction. The next step is the miracle, which corrects the illusions. It's the undoing of the mistaken belief that illusions are true, and it substitutes for that a interpretation, a perception which is kind and gentle and based on love. And so this is really what this whole experience is about. Going back to the top, the fundamental problem in the human experience, the fundamental problem is that we do not know ourselves, do not truly know our brothers or God. It means we're totally confused with regards to our own being, our own identity, the identity of our brothers, and the nature of God itself. But it implies here in the Course that before we arrived on earth, we knew God. To recognize means to know again, implying that you knew before. Before you were born, you were not in human form, you were pure spirit, and you knew there. That point is not essential to A Course in Miracles, but being as it is stated here, we think of this journey as a return back home. We were created by the Creator in home or in paradise, we descended down into the ladder of time to earth and forgot who we are and became very confused. And now we're returning home, much like the story of the prodigal son. Very much like the story of the prodigal son. So, what is it like to know? Knowledge does not change from day to day, year to year, century to century. Knowledge is eternal. It's timeless. And knowledge are the thoughts of God. They are certain. They are not pieced together based upon fragments of understanding. They understand the whole picture. Georgette suggested that image at first had to do with wholeness. Knowledge sees all things. And when you know, there's no reason to ask questions anymore because nothing is unknown. It's all known. And you might say, well, how could I ever possibly know all? And I'll remind you that there is only one mind in all of creation. Each of us are tapped into it. But the real problem that we're facing is one of lack of communication between our own consciousness and the one mind of all creation. And so when that communication is restored, then you know once again. That's the return to knowledge. And okay, so that's a very elevated state, though. I should say that this course is not intended to enable you to return to, how shall I say it? The goal of this course is for you to attain holy perception, true perception. Attaining knowledge is beyond the goal of this course, but this course prepares you for the next step, which is to attain knowledge. All right, so this course gets you into position whereby then you and God can work out the deal whereby you attain knowledge. That's between you and God. We can't teach you that, but we can teach how to, using the method of forgiveness, for you to attain return to holy perception. Okay, we'll go on.
Knowledge is timeless because certainty is not questionable. You know when you have ceased to ask questions. The questioning mind perceives itself in time and therefore looks for future answers. The closed mind believes the future and the present will be the same. This establishes a seemingly stable state that is usually an attempt to counteract an underlying fear that the future will be worse than the present. This fear inhibits the tendency to question at all.
I got a text today from someone that says it was a joke. Okay, this is a joke, that they're going to go out and buy $1,000 worth of toilet paper in case the world comes to an end. They want to be prepared. It was a joke, but it was an end of the world joke, a joke about the world coming to an end. Well, this is an attempt to counteract an underlying fear that the future will be worse than the present. And this fear inhibits the tendency to question at all. All right, so what should we take from this? I have a slide coming up next that will help clarify it. But there are 3 levels that we're talking about today: false perception, true perception, and knowledge. And each one of them deals with questions differently. With knowledge, there is no questions. Knowledge is the end of questions. With true perception, the mind asks questions, but asks questions from a perspective that I am a being in time and space. Time and space defines me. This is a perception, and ask questions from that point of view. Whereas in the ego mind, the closed mind inhibits the tendency to ask questions at all. That would be no questions. So if I were to put this, rephrase this in a different order, the delusional mind believes in its own illusions, is convinced that I already got it figured out. My illusions are real. I got no questions. That's the delusional mind. When we start the journey of healing to undo the ego, we begin to question the assumptions and the beliefs that we have carried up to this point. We question our illusions and open our mind to Holy Spirit's guidance by asking questions. What is this for? What would you have me say? And what would you have me do? You ask questions. And then the third, and that's a healthy thing. That's what the healing mind does. We want to encourage you to ask questions, particularly regarding those things in your life, like, do I really care about these beliefs that I've held from the past? The things that used to define me, is that really true of me? To question those things. And then the knowing mind, as we said, is beyond questions. So we view this program as one of questioning beliefs, of leaving our mind open to Holy Spirit guidance, who will then correct our mistakes with holy guidance. Any questions about that? Aha. Atisha.
There's some similarities between the delusional mind and the knowing mind. They both don't ask any questions. And so I guess I'm just curious as to how one knows that they're in certain knowledge and not in delusion.
Well, love and fear would be one distinguishing thing. The delusional mind is really putting up a superficial defensive mechanism of pretending to understand, but inside is really very afraid, lacks confidence. This would be the improper use of denial. You might question something and a person says, oh, that's I have nothing to do with that. They react with a defensive mechanism. Not that they're open to the questions, they're closed, but they're hiding the fear and uncertainty inside. Whereas the knowing mind is transparent, is got nothing to hide, feels perfectly secure, confident, not little self-confident, confident in the God self of creation. And so there's no defense mechanisms there. And the other thing is one has to pass through, as we said, true perception is the foundation for knowledge. One has to pass through the healing process before one can get to knowing. So there should really, as far as one's experience goes, there should never be any doubts about the two. Although a delusional person can pretend to be at some higher level, someone who wants to play God, for instance, would maybe some cult leaders would pretend to have all the answers, to already know, but underneath all that there is a hidden darkness that is unresolved and is closed one's mind to even honest questions.
True vision is the natural perception of spiritual sight, but it is still a correction rather than a fact. Spiritual sight is symbolic and therefore not a device for knowing. It is, however, a means of right perception, which brings it into the proper domain of the miracle. A vision of God would be a miracle rather than a revelation. The fact that perception is involved at all removes the experience from the realm of knowledge. That is why visions, however holy, do not last.
Mm-hmm. So this paragraph here really is about the process of Course in Miracles guides us through the healing process. It's one of exchanging my little perception for the vision of Christ, true perception. It's based on a spiritual interpretation of life, but it's still intended to be the remedy or the answer to the illusions of the past. It's still a correction. It's not yet a fact. A fact in A Course of Miracles is equated to the knowledge of eternal facts, things that are always and forever true. So spiritual sight helps to heal, but it's not the same as knowledge. It's not a device for knowing, but it's very necessary as a means of right perception. And so that's what the domain of miracles is all about, is exchanging the belief in illusions for the guidance of the Holy Spirit, the spiritual sight that the Holy Spirit offers. And there's also a comment here that contrasts revelations with knowledge. I think I don't want to throw too much at you at once, but vision is a symbol that has to do with sight. This is holy vision, is not the same as a revelation from God. A vision is passing. You have if you encounter someone and you see them as a brother, and you in your heart and in your mind are charitable towards them, that's a good thing. But it's also a passing experience, and then you don't see them again for 3 years, and it's kind of it's temporary. It becomes a part of your soul memory, but the experience of it is passing. This is different than a revelation from God, which is the level of knowledge, which is transforming. When God gives you a gift, it's yours forever. And God is the giver of the gift of a revelation. And so that becomes, it does last. It's your gift forever, for eternity. So our concern in this program is on acquiring true vision, also known as spiritual sight, which is the domain of the miracle, and those are gifts from Christ and the Holy Spirit. Not revelation is a gift from the Father, whereas true vision is a gift from Christ and the Holy Spirit. They have different purposes. They are different forms of spiritual understanding and communication.
The Bible tells you to know yourself or to be certain. Certainty is always of God. When you love someone, you have perceived him as he is, and this makes it possible for you to know him. Until you first perceive him as he is, you cannot know him. While you ask questions about him, you are clearly implying that you do not know God. Certainty does not require action. When you say you are acting on the basis of knowledge, you are really confusing knowledge with perception. Knowledge provides the strength for creative thinking, but not for right doing. Perception, miracles, and doing are closely related. Knowledge is the result of revelation and induces only thought. Even in its most spiritualized form, perception involves the body. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive the truth is not the same as to know it.
Mm-hmm. Many times I have heard, I'm assuming that you have too, of the idea of someone, perhaps a spiritual, devout person in India, went and lived in a cave for 10 years and just was in a state of cosmic bliss, clearly not engaging in the world. Well, and I'm not really, this is not really meant to comment on any of those individuals, but that's what knowledge is like. It doesn't involve the body or action. It's a state of awareness where everything is perfect already. And so there's really nothing that needs to be done. You don't want to raise kids like this because they're going to go hungry. They need attention and all. So knowledge is a state where you don't have to do anything, but just simply bathe in the confidence that all is one. And so you would not really have the need to initiate any actions. Well, that would be pretty impractical for most people. We gave the example of raising kids when they're hungry and all, and there's many more things we could say that require action. That is why Course in Miracles is based and centered on perception and right perception and miracles, because there's a doing element to miracles. It enables us to act in accordance with spiritual guidance, to be of service to others, to lend a hand, to be available to another who needs help. These are types of actions. So again, knowledge does not require action at all. And if you say you're acting on the basis of knowledge, it means you're using the terms, misusing the terms. It means you're confusing knowledge with perception. Because knowledge does strengthen you, but is not a basis for right doing or for any kind of action. So therefore,
I raise my hand.
what would be our message here would be
Reaction. Oh, no.
would be for you to have your holy time in the morning. I recommend you begin your day that way. Have your holy time where you don't have to do anything. You don't have to monitor text messages and phone calls and your list of actions for the day. Have your holy time where you feel the presence of God and you remember who you are and why you're here. And then when that time it feels like it's come to its conclusion, then we get up and engage with the world, and that's where miracles are needed. That's where holy perception comes in. That's what will give you guidance as to who needs your help, where to go, what to say, and to whom. Paul, I muted you before, but go ahead.
Jonica, just a quick question. When I was reading through this, it says knowledge comes from the altar within. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on the altar part of it? Because it seems like that the altar is sort of a holy place and one that one would go to in a different than just kind of checking in with your soul or something. That it's almost well, that's why I'm asking the question, because I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. I think you said it right, Paul. It's different than just checking in with your soul. I think of it as where you go to meet your maker. That would be as simple as I can put it. But it's not a place. It's a state of inner contact with the light within you that is the God within your being is a part of God. It's where you bring your gift, which is your acceptance of the plan of atonement, to the altar. And so this would be, in Course of Miracles symbology, Paul, this would be your closest contact in a worshipful sense with God. It is not the place where you bring your list of things you're asking for, or where but it is the place. The words I like to use, Paul, is when you come naked before the Lord. And by that, I'm not referring to clothing. It's when one is willing to let go of all one's stuff, all one's preoccupations and self-definitions and distractions, and just be childlike and come before the Lord, to be at one with the Lord.
If you're naked, you're letting go of all.
That's the state of the altar.
Okay, well, thank you. That's very helpful.
And we'll have more to say on that because it is a spiritual symbol. It's, you know, as we said, it's not a place, it's not a thing. There aren't a set of, there's one guideline here, and that, you may not have been there, but in the previous chapter, we talked about defiling the altar, which is to make some idols into your God. And the easy way of trying to understand that, let's say someone has made money their God. I'm just picking on that one, but there's a long list of idols here. Then that means of all the things that mean the most to you, what is that? That's what you put on your altar. And so in confusion, we put other things before God on the altar. When we empty ourselves of everything and come naked before God, we have nothing to give except for our acceptance of God's plan. And so there's more to it than we're saying here right now. And I'm sure it'll come up again. And we'll keep revisiting it again and again. And it's interesting. It's like the workbook lessons. You come back and revisit them again, and they mean so much more. Okay, so knowledge requires no actions, but miracles are the domain of actions. They are the domain that is most necessary for our situation that we find ourselves in now. Let's go on.
Right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his altars, which he established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty, and his knowledge will bring peace without question. God is not a stranger to his sons, and his sons are not strangers to each other. Knowledge preceded both perception and time, and will ultimately replace them. That is the real meaning of Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And before Abraham was, I am. Perception can and must be stabilized, but knowledge is stable. Fear God and keep his commandments becomes know God and accept his certainty.
Mm-hmm. Again, so there's a sequence. Before God can communicate directly, right perception is necessary. We must first get in a state of right perception. Then, after right perception, God can communicate. Why? Because the mind is no longer filled with fear of God. The mind no longer, in right perception, the mind has relinquished its idols, its own ego little plans for what would be best for your life and what life is all about. It's relinquished that and allowed the Holy Spirit to write a new message into your heart. And in that state, God can communicate directly to you. And he can communicate his certainty and his knowledge. On the chat, David wrote, the Holy Spirit's my only source of knowledge. And I wanted to comment on that because there's something that we haven't said yet. And the Holy Spirit is not the source of knowledge. The Father, the creator of all life, is the source of knowledge. Therefore, what is the Holy Spirit the source of? David? You're muted.
The Holy Spirit is my communication circuit to my Father. And I include everybody in my petitions and my blessings and my gratitude every day. All the seraphim, Sanavim, cherubim, guardian angels, the spirit of truth, all the circuits, all the spiritual things working on us. There's so many celestial entities. But thank you for clarifying that. It is my brother. It is my Father. It's my Father who's giving me the guidance through the Holy Spirit, and the only thing I know for sure is the Holy Spirit is the source of my knowledge, and that's who I turn to. But I know it's coming from all kinds of other things. I just know that's the circuit. And today's lesson was really great. It was I think it's lesson 61. We are to be examples of and reflect God's light in the world. And I'm really starting to understand that. And it's just fantastic. Thank you, Jonica.
That's what we're doing here. We were put here for light and love and life. And yes, there is a plan. And that's why the acceptance of the plan of atonement is our first responsibility. Is I accept that I was put here for a purpose of love and light and healing and wholeness. My part is essential to God's plan for salvation. Okay, let's go on.
I just wanted to add that I just put something in the chat from today's lesson 61. And it just talks about how arrogant it is of us to not think of ourselves as as being reflecting his light. And I'd never thought about it in that, but to deny doing that is, I just had never thought of it from that perspective. It really struck me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really true. It's why would we want to deny something as loving and as wholesome as the light within us?
It says we are the only source of that light to the world.
Yes. Yeah, we're intended to be our messengers and teachers. Atisha?
Jonica, you mentioned that the Holy Spirit is not the source of knowledge, that's the role of the creator. So is the Holy Spirit then the helper in right perception?
Bingo.
Okay.
So the Holy Spirit has one ear to the creator. Knowledge comes in and she interprets that to us as right perception. In other words, knowledge is very lofty. Do not drive while you're in the midst of a download of revelation. This is why people go into caves to withdraw, to be non-distracted for revelation. But Holy Spirit's interpretations are very practical. They tell you where to go, who to talk to, what to say, and what to do. It's really a beautiful thing. It's adapted to the situation we find ourselves in where we know there's all these people moving about and there's all these things to be done. We need right perception to take right actions. But in our private time, where we get quiet and open ourselves to a holy moment, that's an invitation to receive revelation, which is knowledge. And going outside of A Course in Miracles, I'm making a comment outside the Course. My own experiences of that have been usually at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning when I was woken up in the middle of the night. I'm just saying that's not in the Course, but I think it's because I've got nowhere to go, nothing to do. I'm perfectly rested. There's no distractions or whatsoever. All the conditions necessary are optimal. And that's when I've had those, most of the times, those experiences. It's nothing magical about that time of night, but it is something to be said for where there's no distractions, no plan, being rested, feeling safe and secure, without fear is necessary to be receptive to revelation. Tisha?
Someone used to tell me it's like waiting for the bus. It was calm, and that worked for him. But just going back to this Holy Spirit and right perception, but we have to communicate to the Holy Spirit that we are open to her interpreting for us right perception. Like we have to acknowledge that we want her to do that.
Yeah, it's like a soul glance. It doesn't have to be. Many people pray with words, but it's really turning your heart and soul towards the Holy Spirit with an idea of what say you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for your help here. She doesn't need the words, but your intention to be open to her guidance, yes, that is necessary. Otherwise, you're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the essentials to receiving the Holy Spirit's guidance is that you listen to her voice. You be willing to stop attending to what the ego is yakking about and turn towards your higher self, your holy self. All right.
If you attack error in another, you will hurt yourself. You cannot know your brother when you attack him. Attack is always made upon a stranger. You are making him a stranger by misperceiving him, and so you cannot know him. It is because you have made him a stranger that you are afraid of him. Perceive him correctly so that you can know him. There are no strangers in God's creation. To create as he created, you can create only what you know, and therefore accept as yours. God knows his children with perfect certainty. He created them by knowing them. He recognizes them perfectly. When they do not recognize each other, they do not recognize him.
Mm-hmm. So we've encountered this before, the way the laws of perception work, that our brothers are mirrors of ourselves. What you see in another is what you believe to be true about yourself. And so if your mind sits in a critical, judgmental view of another person, that puts your mind in a critical, judgmental state, and you're going to hurt yourself. you're reinforcing you're telling yourself that judgment and criticism is an appropriate response tool to life. This causes one to believe in the power of ego judgments. And it blocks your ability to hear holy guidance. You cannot know your brother when you attack him. It orients you towards your lower self, that makes others into strangers. And so this clearly means that you cannot know him, nor can you love him while you're in this state. In truth now, I could have put in a paragraph break here, in truth, there are no strangers in God's creation. So in truth, we are all members of the same creative family. There's one holy mind, cosmic mind in all of creation. We are all tapped into it. And so that holy mind is your true mind. That's where you find your true self. So God already knows you and knows everyone else with perfect certainty, and would have you and I return to knowledge so that we know ourselves, others, and God with perfect certainty. This is the plan of atonement, to return us, like the prodigal son, back home. And let's see, was it Tisha asked early about questions, whereas the closed mind that's fearful asks no questions, and the holy mind in knowledge also asks no questions. How do we tell them apart? Well, it has many attributes that stem from those two different states of mind. The closed mind is not unable to recognize others as our brother, and as a result, we're unable to recognize God. And so this actually, I don't know if I want to go there and make a comment on practices of some religions that are hostile towards other religions. I don't think I want to go there right now, because that would be a form of attack. But clearly, all right, so I'll just recite history. The 30 Years' War in Europe lasted 30 years, where Protestants and Catholics were killing one another endlessly because of their belief systems were different. It would be the simple way of saying it. And so when you do not recognize each other, how can you do that in the name of God? And how can you recognize God? I mean, it should be in our current view of the nature of wholeness and healing obvious the confusion there. To wind up wanting to kill others is to elevate fear and attack to maximum levels, where we wind up hurting ourselves and make the others into strangers. And so these are all blocks to the awareness of love. I wanted to take a moment to summarize some thoughts that we read about today. because these are actually, let's see, maybe I should tell my story again about the fish. Uh, two fish are on their way out to go swimming, and as they're headed out, another older fish comes from the other direction. I'm butchering this, sorry. Comes from the other direction and says, "How's the water, boys?" And two younger fish look at themselves, and after he goes by, and they say, "What is water?" Because the fish are immersed in this environment. They don't even understand what it is that they're immersed in. They don't question it. Well, in many ways, false perception is like that. We can be immersed in an environment of illusions without questioning it and not even realize what it is that we're doing. A little self-confession. When I use judgment against others and make them into a stranger, I don't realize that I'm attacking myself. I don't even realize what it is that I'm setting myself up for. So this is all a way of saying that these concepts we're dealing with here are often, we're in the middle of it and don't even know what we're in. In the future, when I say we're swimming in it, you know what I mean. We're swimming in false perception and in true perception, and sometimes even revelation of knowledge, and most of the times don't know it. With knowledge, you do. So we talked about 3 states of consciousness, and these are different experiences that are associated with each state. They are qualitatively, meaning there is a quality to them that is very different one from another, and many different attributes. In the first state, all your difficulties stem from ignorance about your true holy self, not knowing your own divine nature, being out of touch, thinking you're a body, thinking you're an ego, thinking you're going to die. And as a result of not knowing yourself, you can't possibly know your brother, and therefore you cannot know God in such a state of confusion. And this is evidenced when we attack others when we use our mind, even if we only do it in our thoughts, use our mind to make strangers in opposition of others. But the Course is a program for helping us to become free of that ancient prison and transition from self-deception into self-awareness, start to question once again the nature of one's life, the nature of one's being, the meaning of life and of love and of God, and transition from spiritual blindness to clarity. And so we can view that as consisting of 3 major stages. First, as we emphasized earlier in the year, you've got to get out of the pit of fear. You can't rise to healthiness and holiness while you're in the midst of the fire. You must escape from fear, in which mind training is the method that we use. It's a philosophic elimination of fear through training the mind and learning to set boundaries around false perception. Pay attention to how it feels. When you start to feel yourself anxious and fearful and afraid, that's an indication that you're in a state of false perception. Set boundaries and immediately should turn to the Holy Spirit. You got to set boundaries. You can't allow those being overwhelmed by illusions to just run freely within your mind, or else you will attack yourself and drive yourself into despair. And so we have to stop miscreating, is the term that we used earlier in this chapter. That once we do that, we're ready to take the next step forward and really listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit and to receive a higher vision, which is natural. This is what we were intended to do here, to heal under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But this is still a remedy, a fix for the problem of false perception. It's not the final state of returning to perfect oneness. But this state of calm and tranquil true perception is necessary before God can communicate to you via revelation and knowledge. It's necessary. You cannot receive revelation from God in a fearful state. And then finally, as we've mentioned, the final state, this is a high-level outline, is the return to knowledge, when we're again now one is awakening to the truth of not only of yourself and everyone else, but a full acceptance of the plan of atonement, which opens the channels of the channels of communication are already there, but they are blocked and obscured by our illusions, our fears, and our self-deceptions, which, when they are removed, the channels of communication reconnect, and God is able to communicate his certainty, which brings peace beyond question. David?
Thank you for that excellent summary, Jonica. I just wanted to say that I'm becoming aware that all of my false perceptions, and you've mentioned this, and now I'm getting the felt experience, start with a false identity at the core of it. So I have to, it's really an identity question. I am one. I have everything. My needs are met. That's the source of it for me. Thanks.
It really is, David. The Course actually says that these two different thought systems, the false one and the true one, have a central point or a starting point. And the starting point is, what am I? And of course, the ego has an answer for that. And the Holy Spirit has an entirely different answer. What am I? And in order to really complete this journey, we have to get to that center point and correct it there. The Course would lead us to believe that when that major error, and that is a major error, is corrected, that the rest of the errors fall like dominoes. You know, when there's a chain of dominoes, they fall once we've corrected the central problem of what am I in relationship to creation, in relationship to God and to others. I am as God created me. Well, that is as far as we're going to go in our reading for this session. But that's still more on the journey ahead, and we'll pick that up next time. Thank you very much, Atisha, for reading. Thank you all for your questions and your willingness to question the illusions. Don't beat up, please. Don't beat up on yourself because we're not in a state of perfect knowledge as yet. Know that that vision of your being in a state of perfect knowledge is already being held for you in the mind of the Holy Spirit. She sees you as you charitably as you will be when this entire journey is completed. And so if she believes in it, then we can be confident in believing in it ourselves. So thank you all, my brothers. Much love to you and sisters. Much love to you. Look forward to connecting again soon. Namaste.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. Namaste, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Peace and love.